Hi everyone, it's Lisa, and I thought I'd do a fish recipe this time because we've got the fisheries unit on now for our class, and actually it's kind of a 2-week thing, so maybe I should call it Fisheries Fortnight. Anyway, so I'm just going to get into the slides here. I want to make this cured salmon dish, which has fennel and absinthe as flavor to it. And I'm kind of pleased with how it turned out because it was my first go, and after talking to friends and getting some encouragement, I thought I'd give it a try. And one thing I've been studying in geography, I had to pick a cultural topic as well as a physical geography topic to look at. So my area is foodways. And so I've been looking at things like food preservation techniques, and smoking and drying are ones that have been known for a long time. And another one is to cure food with salt. These are ways that were developed before refrigeration to store food during periods when there wasn't any available, in terms of farming or hunting. And so being able to preserve food for long periods of time was a very valuable thing to be able to do in the ancient world. Um, so Sue Shepherd's book is really helpful for this, talking about the cultural context. You've also got these books here. Now, the salmon cookbook and the cured book are really interesting because they've got these different recipes and they explain the science behind them as well. So that's pretty helpful. And this recipe in particular is using things that in ancient times were really sought after commodities. Salt and sugar and spices were all signs that you were a fairly wealthy person and could afford to do this sort of thing. And the picture here is from a tomb in ancient Egypt. So you can see that people are just cutting open fish and salting them. And that's something that is still done today. And it does demonstrate that we've known about this for many thousands of years now. So this is part of human history. So you'll need, for this recipe, you'll need some tools. The filleting knife for the fish and tweezers are very handy. About a pound or a half kilo of raw salmon, and the right kind of salt is good. So as opposed to just regular table salt, this is a coarse sea salt. Kosher salt as well is another type that they use for this. So these are really important to have, and I'll explain why. Um, Also sugar, white or golden sugar is good. And the seasonings, I use fennel seed. You can also use stuff like peppercorns, juniper berries. Fresh fennel or dill is nice. I didn't have any of that, so I used the seed instead. And also alcohol can be helpful for increasing the flavor. So my friend Phil suggested using gin. I didn't have any, so I used absinthe instead, although aquavit is also good, I hear, for this kind of dish. Now, I had a choice between two different types of absinthe, both made here on the island, and I ended up going with the type that's made up in Nanaimo. And the reason I picked that one, you might ask, well, why go for that? And I decided to use it because it's barrel aged, so it's got this very strong kind of smoky flavor to it. And I thought it'll help offset the taste of the salt. And another question to ask, of course, is why do you have so much absinthe in the house, Lisa? And we'll just pass on that for now. And you also need a container for the salmon. So the non-metallic ones are good. Glass or ceramic or plastic even are ideal, although I've been told that stainless steel is also okay. But I had glass and plastic ones, so I use those. Also a plastic bag that's big enough to put the salmon in, and that'll be helpful. Anyway, um, so if you've got fresh salmon, you should freeze it for at least 48 hours beforehand in case you have pathogens in there. And that's what the freezing is to help get rid of. If it's already frozen, you'll have like previously frozen on the label. That's okay, you're all set. So I had a whole fish actually from Fairway because it was on sale. And so you want to start fairly small because you're just trying this out and you don't know whether you're going to like it or not, basically. So having a piece of salmon that's about 1 pound or a half kilo, you'll keep the skin on it, but just remove the bones or make sure that they're gone. So you may have to fillet it and pull out the little tiny pin bones. So you may have to feel around in the salmon, and just if you feel the end of a bone, just reach in with the tweezers and yank it out. If thinking about the size of fish, these bills in North America are 6 inches long. So if you think along the lines of 3 of these bills, that's kind of the surface area you've got to work with. And that would include like both sides of the salmon, basically. So that's what to think about if you're considering making this dish and you want to know like how big a piece of fish should I go for, because this is kind of the ratio I've got for the amount of mixture I've estimated for the salting. So here's the cure, and you're going to need a quarter cup of coarse sea salt or kosher salt. And you can see in the picture the size of the crystals involved there. They're pretty big. And also you're going to need some white or golden sugar. And in Scandinavian curing, traditionally, they tend to add a bit more sugar than salt. So I've done that here. So a third of a cup to a half a cup of the sugar to go with a quarter cup of salt. And what we'll try to do with this is we're going to try to get the water out of the fish. The salt's going to create what they call a solute-rich environment, and by upping the concentration of salt to 20% or more, it's going to use osmosis to draw that water out of the fish cells and also out of any microorganisms that are in the area as well. And so that'll help preserve the food and cure the fish. So here's what you need for this. You have the sugar, the salt, and the mixture of seasonings. So you mix the sugar and salt together in a bowl. Here are the seasonings. I was using crushed fennel seed, also the peppercorns and the juniper berries. And you can either use a mortar and pestle like I did, or you can stick it in a food processor or blender, not for very long, because it's still good to have it fairly coarse, not too finely ground up. If you start with already ground herbs and spices, they may not have lasted as long in terms of hanging on to the flavor, so you may need to use a bit more to get that same type of flavor. So here's what the fennel seed looks like going into the mortar right there. And peppercorns, again, I was using white, but black would work just as well, I'm sure. And here's what they look like when they've been crushed up a bit. Again, a fairly coarse grade there. And the juniper berries, like that. And so again, you mix these things together and you end up with this very fragrant, it's really quite aromatic, and I like the smell, the mixture kind of licoricey scent, and it was really nice to kind of mix it around. And so this is the cure, and you rub it on the exposed surfaces of the salmon like that, just in the cut surfaces, just kind of slather it on like that. And you may have to go over it again if you got some extra mixture left, just use it all up. And then when you've done that, you can pour the absinthe over the surfaces. I can drizzle it on with a spoon or something. And here it is in a shot glass. I kind of measured out the absinthe. And then when you've done that, you can kind of fold the fish if it's one piece, or if they're two pieces, just kind of maneuver them so that they're the two salted sides are touching each other. Put them in the bag, so the plastic bag like that, and then put everything into the container so it catches any of the runoff from the plastic bag, like so. And you can already see the liquid starting to come out of the fish right there, and it's pooling in the bag as intended. Now, at this point, you stick the stuff in the fridge, and it's good to weight it down first because you're trying to squish out that water, and the extra pressure really helps with that. So you put the plastic bags there in the containers, and then you put on anything like that's heavy that you don't mind being exposed to fish juice, like canned goods as I'm using here. And you leave it in there for anywhere from 1 to 3 days, so 24 to 72 hours. Phil said don't leave it in more than 4 days because it makes the fish kind of tough and a little bit too extreme in terms of flavor. So that's what I did. I thought, okay, I'll leave it in for 2 days and see what it's like. So that's what I did. And here it is underneath the pressure of the canned goods, like that. And so I left it in there. Every 12 hours or so, I would just reach in and I'd flip the fish over so that it was all the liquid was kind of going through the fish. So I knew it was all kind of saturated. And I noticed that there was a lot of liquid coming off. So I ended up pouring off some of it. So it wasn't too dilute. So that's what I did. After 48 hours or so, I rinsed the rest of the rub off the fish, and I put the fish in a container that didn't have a really tight fitting lid. I used this kind of glass casserole dish, and Phil said, just let it air dry overnight for a few hours so that the water leaves the surface and it's gotten a little bit shiny and dry on top, so it's easier to cut that way. So I tried that out, and I actually did it where I left the lid off altogether off one of the other containers, and it seemed to work pretty well that way too. So anyway, so that's what happened. I took the fish out afterwards when it was dried off. I began to slice it, thinking about smoked salmon in the stores, the really expensive stuff. It's very thinly sliced. So I tried to emulate that when I was cutting the fish. And I noticed at that point that the skin had come loose. You can actually peel it off. which is pretty cool. And so I had these sliced fish pieces right there, and I decided to try to freeze them as an experiment. Like, I wonder how it'll taste if I put it in the freezer for a while. So I spread the slices out on a piece of parchment paper, and actually several pieces that were cut to fit the container. And I use parchment paper because it'll break down in the compost, unlike wax paper. So I spread out the fish on each of these little layers of paper and stack them up like so. And then I put the lid on the container and put it in the freezer for a couple of days. And then when I wanted to try the fish, I took a piece of paper out with the fish on it and left it in the fridge for a few hours before I ate it. So it had time to thaw out that way. And it worked really well. I mean, one of the things that I found was that it kind of compensates for those times when I don't really do a good job on the baking. I tried sourdough bread. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well, and it just didn't rise very well, so it's very dense. But that kind of dense bread is what they sell in these gourmet shops for having with smoked salmon. So I thought, hey, I'll just slice up the bread, thin slices, and I put the fish on, and I had it with thin sliced sweet onions and tomatoes. Also, cucumbers would work pretty well, I imagine. And that's how it was. It turned out better than I thought it would. And it was a nice flavor. I think next time I do this, I will use this Vancouver Island Salt Company smoked salt to give it that kind of smoky flavor. Since I don't have a smoker, this is kind of a way of cheating that. So I'll give that a try next time. So I wanted to just give some thanks here to my grandparents, who I never met. My grandpa was a fisher out of Prince Rupert during the 1930s. So he went out in that little boat into the big Pacific Ocean, and he caught fish to provide for his family. So thanks to him, I'm here today. And I wanted to thank my friend Phil in Queens for the basic recipe and for talking me through some of the hard parts. So thanks so much. Hope you have a good day.